Well, once again, happy Easter, everyone. This is the high point of the Easter season, which nowadays seems to have a meaning that goes beyond Christianity, and I think that's a good thing. Easter is one of those holidays like Christmas where a lot of the symbols and ideas were taken from non-Christian, or what some people might call pagan traditions, and they adopted them in an attempt to, let's say, Christianize or convert other cultures. And just like we see with Christmas, it kind of backfires sometimes. Sometimes the secular symbols become more pervasive than anything else, and that's what happens. Eggs, rabbits, lilies, and other flowers, they're all symbols of fertility and ever-renewing life that happens in the springtime, at least in the western hemisphere, in the north of the equator, I guess. And then somehow chocolate got added to the mix. Because, does anybody really know? Because why not, right? I mean, because why not? Seems like everything is better with a little chocolate, which I always want to take some time to remind everyone, chocolate is a vegetable. Never forget this, because sugar comes from cane and beets, and those are both plants. Cocoa beans, right? Chocolate itself comes from beans. So chocolate is a vegetable. So remember to eat your vegetables this Easter. I love the idea of Easter being something that humankind can share from more of a global perspective. Everybody loves chocolate, right? But beyond that, it's something that we can share without having to convert anyone or adopt a new belief system. And for the past 3 weeks, we've been talking about how the experience of the life and teachings of Jesus has expanded and evolved in the world. We covered just that short span between the Gospel of Mark and the Gospel of John, just 45 short years where we see this remarkable transformation. And what we see really is this shared experience of Jesus as a spiritual teacher. It started with his followers, and then it spread way beyond the boundaries of Christianity. There's a book that I've worked with before, this one here, called Jesus 2.1. Jesus 2.1, an upgrade for the 21st century. This was written by Reverend Tom Shepard, used to be the minister at Sunrise Unity down the hill out here, and he now serves as the professor of theology and historical studies at Unity Institute. And what he says in this book is that Jesus came to teach the art of spiritual living. Healing, prosperity, improved relationships, self-esteem, growth in God consciousness. Jesus Christ didn't come to teach theology, but rather the art of spiritual living. And now we see it catching on in a lot of ways we may have never expected to see before. Lots of non-Christians will talk about Jesus as that example of the art of spiritual living. Thich Nhat Hanh, he's a Vietnamese Zen Buddhist monk. He's a spiritual master and teacher in his own right. He's written not one, but 2 books about Jesus. One is called Living Buddha, Living Christ. The other is Going Home. Jesus and Buddha as brothers. Then we have the Quran. Guess whose name shows up in the Quran more than the other? Jesus or Muhammad? Jesus. By a huge margin. Jesus shows up about 25 times in the Quran, and we're talking about the same person here. Not some other guy named Yeshua or whatever. And compare that to Muhammad. Muhammad's name shows up about 5 times. It wasn't about him. That's really interesting. We have Mahatma Gandhi, who was a Hindu, also regarded as a spiritual teacher. He once said this. He said, "I like your Christ. I don't like your Christians. Your Christians are so unlike your Christ." Yeah. That was a long time ago, too, when you think about it. You know, that was the 40s and earlier than that. He saw, charitably, we'll call it the hypocrisy, And he went directly to his own experience of what the life and teachings of Jesus meant to him. And he found something that was worthwhile, something worth emulating. So Jesus, as this spiritual teacher, is what I like to call the universal Christ. He isn't just for Christians anymore. And I think one of the reasons why people still study his life and teachings is because he did more than just talk. He walked the talk, right? His actions matched his words. When Jesus warned people about the dangers of being obsessed with wealth and power, he wasn't riding in a chauffeur-driven chariot wearing gold-embroidered robes, was he? He had the clothes on his back, the sandals on his feet as his only possessions. People saw the authenticity there. People got it. They listened to him, and above all, they remembered. From a unity perspective, don't we always say that it isn't enough to just know and study spiritual principles? It isn't enough to just talk about them. We have to live them. That's our fifth unity principle, and it really comes from the example that we see in the life and teachings of that spiritual teacher that we know as Jesus. He was dedicated to principle even under the threat of death, and he never backed down. The way he faced personally the great question of life and death is why people experienced him as an example of expanded humanity, what it meant to live the fullness of our humanity. You know, so often today we see Jesus being treated as a highway to heaven, right, or a ticket to eternity. Instead of focusing on something beyond this life, many people choose to see the teachings of Jesus as a way of looking at life here and now. Right here. How do you live when death is imminent? And let's face it, it kind of always is, isn't it, when you really contemplate it? What is there about life that transcends death? What will we do with this short time that we have? That's what it brings up for a lot of people. Now, my personal favorite Easter story is from the Gospel of Mark. The name has nothing to do with it. It just happens that Mark is the first of the four Gospels to have been written earlier than all the rest. And the Easter story in Mark is very different from the other three that you find in Matthew, Luke, and John. According to Mark, when the Sabbath was over, there were two women named Mary and one woman named Salome who went to the tomb to anoint the body. And when they got there, they found the tomb was empty. And there was this young man dressed in white who said, "He's not here. He's been raised. He's gone on ahead of you to Galilee." And that's where the story ends. 3 women and an empty tomb. No ghostly appearances. No appearances really of any kind in Mark. Now, much later, someone decided to add 11 more verses to the Gospel of Mark, which added some appearances by Jesus, and it also brought the male disciples back into the story. Isn't that kind of interesting? Because I guess someone in that patriarchal culture just couldn't stand to let women have the last word, so to speak, right? That's the way it ends, and they couldn't stand it, but that was the way the original story intended for it to be. This shorter version of Mark, without those 11 additional verses, doesn't give us a definitive answer about what happened. It leaves us with a bit of a mystery, so that we have to look deeply. We have to ponder for ourselves what happened and what meaning we want to give the events and the story. It treats us like adults. That's what I like about it. It treats us like adults who can figure things out for ourselves instead of having to be spoon-fed. Somewhere along the line, humankind became addicted to certainty. And now we want everything to be tied up in a nice, neat little bundle that's easy to carry and gives us easy black and white answers. Oh, don't make me think or try something new. Give us the easy answers. Tell me what to do. Tell me what to believe, because doubt and not knowing is uncomfortable. It's not a comfy place to be. Instead of simply saying, "I don't know," it's somehow more comforting to make up a story about entities or magical beings. It's almost as if we would rather surrender part of our humanity and give away our power than step into the unknown. And that wasn't what Jesus was about at all. He showed us that the best way to embrace the fullness of our humanity, which is also coextensive with our divinity, the best way to embrace that is to follow him into the unknown and embrace the mystery. Even a little bit of mystery. The tomb is empty. What does it mean to be empty? Containing nothing, no substance, nothing to it. Doesn't mean what we thought it did. It's not an ending, it's not a destination, it has no power. There's the young man dressed in white. Doesn't say he's an angel, does it? Doesn't say he's an angel. There's nothing supernatural about him. The young man in white is simply a character who advances the narrative by telling the women, move along, nothing to see here, nothing to focus on here. You won't find the Christ among dead things. Get out of the darkness and back out into the world and look for him out there. And when I say him, I mean the Christ. The Christ is a divine idea. You can't kill it. You can't lock it in a tomb. A tomb is a monument to dead things. We end up worshiping the tomb or treating it as a focal point. Don't do that. It's empty. It's powerless. The Christ is this one big divine idea. It's a living thing. And I'm going to paraphrase our co-founder Charles Fillmore, who came up with his own explanation of the meaning and significance of Jesus as the Christ. He said, Christ is the name of the God mind expressed in everyone. When we identify ourselves with that expression, we can rise above the kind of thinking that causes all of the suffering we see in the world. That's the invitation. Before the resurrection in the gospel stories, we find that people were mired in lack consciousness. And we all know what lack consciousness is, right? It's this particular mindset that looks around at the world and says there's not enough. And it does that as a way to justify our fears. It does that as a way to justify our tendency to want to pull back when instead we should be expanding. The lack consciousness that we see particularly in the Gospels looks out at the world, actually looks out at what I've referred to as a demon-haunted world. It looks at that world and it says, not enough. Not enough goodness in the world. There's not enough goodness in the world to overcome the oppression, the negativity, and the darkness. What they were really saying in lack consciousness is that there wasn't enough goodness in humankind to do anything about anything. You know, at the start of our service, we affirm our vision, like we did today. Centered in God, we co-create a world that works for all. Being centered in God simply means that we are being the very Christ, the very best Christ that we can, so that instead of having to wait for death, or having to wait for this afterlife experience of heaven, maybe we can do something to start bringing a little bit of that heaven on earth right now. There's a writer whose work I've been following for a few years now. Here he is. His name is Parker Palmer. You might be familiar with him. He's a Quaker. He's an author. He's the director of an organization called the Center for Courage and Renewal. And just this last Wednesday, he wrote a short article that was entitled, "What We Need is Here." He says, what we need is within us and between us, in the human heart and in various forms of life together. Whether the problem is mechanical, spiritual, or political, what we need is here more often than we think. As Wendell Berry says, we don't need to wait for a new heaven or earth in order to live by the truth that what we need is here. All we need is to be quiet in heart and in eye clear. Then we will see and gain access to the resources within and between us, the amazing abundance of self and community. I thought he summed up the message of Easter perfectly, even though I don't think that's what he intended to do when he wrote that article. The tomb is empty. The external symbol of the Christ is gone and is now raised into collective consciousness, which means that it's up to us now, it's up to everyone to get quiet, clear of eye, and find that within us and among us, that amazing abundance of self and community that Parker Palmer was talking about there. It's really the best hope we have. And it's really the only antidote to the great lie of lack consciousness, which tries to tell us that there isn't enough good in the world to dispel that which we call dark. The truth is that all of the good that we need is already here. Happy Easter. See you next week.